everybody. This is part number 2 of my 3-part Oklahoma Sooner football preview for 2012. Part 1, we talked about the offense, but now it's time to talk about the defense and special teams for the Sooners. Not too long ago, Oklahoma welcomed back a familiar face to the defensive side. We're not talking about a player. We're talking about Mike Stoops, who was the defensive coordinator of some of the best OU defenses the program ever put on the field, and that was, of course, back during the early 2000s. Stoops had been the head coach at Arizona for a while, but that experiment went awry, so now he returns to Norman to be the team's defensive coordinator. And look, this is not going to be a Brent Venables bashing period, okay? You can go somewhere else if you want to see that, because I do think Venables did some nice things during his time with Oklahoma, and certainly wish him the best as defensive coordinator at Clemson. But you would have to admit, though, that since the early 2000s, when Stoops was there, and when Stoops left to become Arizona head coach in the mid-2000s, that maybe something since that period was missing from the Sooners. Maybe it was just a lack of attitude. Maybe it was just a lack of emotion. Maybe it was just because the defense may not have tackled the image of their defensive coordinator. But for whatever reasons, you just got a feeling that something was missing from Oklahoma's defense. And maybe Brent Venables' absence in turn of Mike Stoops' return is a good thing for the Sooners. Now, Stoops knows that he has a big challenge ahead of him. After all, this defense does not have the Teddy Lamons or Rocky Calmuses or Tommy Harrises or Derek Straits or Roy Williams of the world. This defense is good, but they're not as good as those defenses, okay? So don't kid yourself. And I don't want to hear fans the first time Oklahoma loses a game or gives up a ton of points saying, man, I thought Mike Stoops was the answer. What happened to him? He used to be a great defensive coordinator. The Big 12 has changed a little bit since Mike Stoops' first tenure as defensive coordinator. For one, it's a higher scoring conference now. Remember, too, there are more good offenses out there. Texas Tech may not be a great team, but they still have a pretty darn good offense. They're still pretty hard to contain. And the addition of West Virginia also makes it even harder. So it's a different era now. But the things that Mike Stoops can still have control over, I think, number one, is making sure that his team knows their assignments. And he's already addressed this. He said that he's simplifying things for his defense. He wants their speed to be something that they can take advantage of. And the big plays, they might give up some, but they can't give up near as many as they did last year. I mean, after all, they were 79th in the country when it came to pass defense. Those losses against Tech, Baylor, and Oklahoma State had one common denominator: way too many big plays given up in all 3 of those defeats. So that's something that he's addressed. And also, too, is for his team to have his attitude, to have his passion, and maybe that's something we didn't see near enough of these past few seasons. It's about attitude. It's about knowing where you're supposed to be, taking advantage of your strengths, and hopefully we'll see that this season and the seasons to come in this, the second tenure for Mike Stoops as defensive coordinator. Well, key number 1, and it's one that cannot be ignored. We're talking about quarterback pressure. Look, this defense, of course, the secondary, they've had their share of issues, but at least they have nearly everybody back. The linebacking core, it looks like it's going to be a strong area, but the defensive line, this is the area of the biggest concern for this team. That's because you've got some new faces. They've had to deal with some changes. You're not going to have Frank Alexander or Rondell Lewis applying pressure to the QB. They were instrumental last year, and a big reason why Oklahoma was 8th in the country in quarterback sacks. This was a strength for the Sooners, and it needs to continue to be, but now you have to do it with new personnel. At one defensive end, you'll have R.J. Washington. Last season came on strong. Matter of fact, had a couple of quarterback sacks in that bowl win against Iowa. And then Chuka Nudale looks like he's going to be the other defensive end. He played some a year ago. And the number 3 guy looks like will be Rashad Favors. He's a former linebacker. Some other defensive ends to mention for OU. Chaz Nelson. They thought they could get him into the rotation, but he's going to have to wait because he recently had an injury, so he's going to be out 6 weeks. Could be back in time, though, for the Texas Tech game in early October. And then P.J. Lindley, he's another valuable defensive end, but just like Nelson, currently he has injury issues. And one guy that they're going to have to bring out of red shirt is going to be Charles Tapper. So looks like he'll be a part of the defensive end rotation, too. Defensive tackles, well, you might be saying, how come we didn't mention David King at defensive end? Played defensive end last year, but right now he's going to be more serviceable as a defensive tackle. A big reason why is because Stacey McGee, you probably already heard, suspended indefinitely. So naturally, I'm not going to lie to you, that stinks because you can never have enough of any position in football, but in particular with the defensive interior. So no biggie for who knows how long, but you do have experience on that defensive line. Jamarcus McFarland played last year, as did Casey Walker. Walker probably the most talented of the bunch. They're back at defensive tackle. We already mentioned David King. And you have Jordan Phillips, whom last season didn't play. He's 6'6", 318 pounds. Coaches have said that during the offseason he got into better shape, so that should translate into playing time for Jordan Phillips. We're going to talk about the linebacking core, and I do think this is a big strength for the Sooners, even though I know you lose Travis Lewis, who was an All-American type, battled with some injuries last year, but he was mainly your vocal leader on this team. So now Tom Wort has to become the best linebacker on this team and also, in a way, a leader. Wort playing the middle linebacker position in his third year playing for the Sooners, and he's not very big. In fact, this linebacking core, they're not big at all. But the one thing that they'll do, they'll put a lick on you. They know how to play the game. And that's the main thing you're looking for. Wort, only 6 feet even, and did put on a little bit of muscle. He's now at 229 pounds. Tom Wort, the big thing for him is to stay healthy. He's been dinged up throughout his career. So that means that Jaden Bird has to be ready to take over if Wort still has those issues of injury. And then you're looking at the weak side linebacker position. Corey Nelson, he's a good one. He returns from that spot. Backing him up is Daniel Franklin. And by the way, Nelson, just like Wort, not very big, just 6'1". And then rounding out the linebacking core for the Sooners, you have Joseph Ebeloy. Ebeloy will play the strong side linebacking spot, and he's the only senior amongst the 3 linebackers. And backing him up will be Frank Shannon. So the linebacking core, probably the one area where I'm the least concerned about. But again, really watch for the health of Tom Wort. He can stay healthy. Look for him to have an all Big 12 type season. And then we got to talk about the secondary, which in the way we already have the secondary last season in their 3 losses, which were to Tech, Baylor, and Oklahoma State. There was a common denominator in all 3 of those defeats, and that was so many big passing plays given up. And this is the area that I think Mike Stoops is really going to address the most. The good news is you have a lot of experience back, so that never hurts. At the corner positions, you have DeMontre Hurst. This is his 4th year starting for Oklahoma. And you also have back at the other corner, you're going to have back Aaron Colvin. Now, Colvin last season had 84 tackles, which is actually pretty good because he is the leading returning tackler for the Sooners. And a guy that probably will see playing time as well from the corner will be Gabe Lynn. And I hope that Gabe Lynn does well. I really do wish the guy well. Last season, though, I'm not going to lie, he did drive me absolutely crazy, especially in the Texas Tech game where he was not only getting burned, but constantly burned. Tech kept going at him, and Lynn did not adjust. So you hope he has a better 2012. Maybe Mike Stoops coming back will help out that situation, but he's got to get better. And then at the safety positions, one of the best you're going to find in the country in Tony Jefferson, an absolute hitter. Jefferson last year played both linebacker as well as free safety, but this time it looks like he's going to be a full-time starter at free safety. Had 74 tackles a year ago, which was 3rd on the team. And rounding out the secondary for Oklahoma is going to be Javon Harris. He's only 5'11", but he does play big. Matter of fact, had 3 interceptions a year ago. So there's speed for the Oklahoma secondary. There's experience, but they've got to know their assignments because they're going to go against some really good offenses once again. That's what you get in the Big 12 when you go against the offenses like Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, when you go against now West Virginia and TCU with the returning quarterback in Casey Paha. OU's defense is going to have their work cut out for them, but I honestly believe that with a defensive coordinator that's been a part of the mix before in Mike Stoops, this team will learn from last year, and I do believe that they will be improved. How improved? Well, only time's going to tell that, but I do feel confident that this Sooner defense can get the job done. If you're looking at the special teams, got experience in this area. Tress Way finally has reached his senior year, and he's had a nice career punting for the Sooners, averaging about 43 yards per boot. But the thing he's the best at is placing the ball inside the 20-yard line. Tress Way is a field position changer. And Michael Honeycutt, maybe he's finally the answer in terms of place kicking. If you've watched my shows over the years, you know how critical I have been of OU place kicking, and for good reason. After the Texas Tech game in which Honeycutt missed a couple of makeable field goals, Honeycutt caught fire, made a 53-yarder on the road against Kansas State, and you can say the rest is history because Honeycutt would make his next 10 in a row. So you have Honeycutt, who now enters this season with momentum. As far as kick coverage from a year ago, the Sooners improved in this department. They did give up a kickoff return for a TD last year against Texas, but that's really the only bad thing Oklahoma did in that entire game last October. They did, like I said, improve as far as covering kicks. As far as covering punts, they could do a little bit better in this area. Last season, they gave up about 11 yards per punt return. And you might be saying, who's going to return kicks? Well, pretty much the same guys you saw a year ago. You won't have Broyles, but you will have Kenny Steele's returning punts. Don't be surprised also if Justin Brown, the Penn State product, is used in this area. He was a special teams player last year for Penn State as well. And returning kicks, Dominic Whaley, and it looks like Roy Finch will be the two main guys handling those duties. So that does it as far as my look at the defense and the special teams. Part 2 of my Oklahoma preview is in the books. I have one more part to go, and that is Oklahoma's schedule as well as my predictions for the 2012 Oklahoma Sooners. I'll have that on my next show. Boomer Sooner.